President of the Friends of the Aiken County Historical Museum, and I want to welcome you to the second of our 6 winter lecture series. And just wanted to say that if you're not a member of the Friends, we would love to have you. So stop on your way out and request a membership brochure. And I'm glad that you all came on this rainy day, Super Bowl Sunday. Good for you. You'll be all ready for the big game. And I'm going to turn this over to Kenna Black, who's our events director, and she'll introduce our speaker.
So first, a big thank you to Mr. Rushton, who's filling in as today's speaker. Verne Rushton was born in Aiken in 1950. He moved to North Augusta in 1952 and attended North Augusta schools throughout his career. He played basketball and baseball for North Augusta from 1966 to 68. He started teaching in 1974 and continued through 2003, coaching softball, basketball, girls tennis, football, cross country, and boys track, and was the athletic trainer for 19 years. He missed seeing only 14 high school football games between 1954 and 2003, a span of 50 years. He retired from teaching English in 2013 and coaching in 2019. And Coach Rushton, would you like basketball?
I appreciate y'all taking out this. John Felak, who is supposed to have been here, who is head of the Hall of Fame, and I'm on that committee. And when he found out his aunt had passed away up in Pennsylvania, and the funeral was this afternoon at 3 o'clock, it kind of threw him in a bind. So Tuesday, when I was on the way to the dentist, I have a phone call, and I thought John was calling me about our Hall of Fame that's coming up March 2nd. And he said, "Verne, I need a favor." He said, "I couldn't think of anybody with a bigger mouth and a larger brain as far as North Augusta football is concerned than you." And I said, "Well, I don't know about all that, but anyway, what do you need, John?" And he said, "What are you doing Sunday?" And I said, "Well, Sunday I go to church in the morning, and then I usually go home and play with my dog. Then I'm going to watch Carolina basketball, and then I'm going to watch the Super Bowl." He said, "Well, what are you doing about 2 o'clock?" I said, "I don't know." He said, "Well, you need to be going to Aiken." And I said, "What for?" He said, "Because at 3 o'clock I need you to make a speech for me." And I said, "What on?" He said, "North Augusta football." And I said, "Well, how long do I have?" And he said, "Well, Verne, you can only speak 45 minutes and answer questions for 15. And I said, "How about I speak for an hour, and then just if they have any questions, I'll answer 1 or 2 and then leave." And he said, "No." And so anyway, you have me instead of John. I was talking to the lady and gentleman here at the front. I'm a little bit older than John. I didn't realize that, but found out when I went over to speak with him the other day. I'm about 6 years older than he is. I have a birthday coming up soon. And any of you that are old Aikenites, my uncle was J.W. Rushton that ran J.W. Rushton Construction, and I was telling them that there's a road out in East Aiken by the name of Rushton Road, and that's named after my aunt. My cousin, Martha Ann, still lives it. And my uncle, the hierarchy of Aiken has decided to do, tear down and rebuild, which everybody is doing it in the world anymore. Old Aiken downtown was built by my uncle back in the 40s and 50s. And he used to, I was telling them I'd come over here for once a month, we'd eat dinner together over here, and Uncle Willard will take me to a different building and show me what he built and the construction and all the architecture that went through it, and he was quite a character. But I'm not here to talk about my family or that. I'm about to, I don't know how many of y'all are football fans. 1954, the lady Kenna was telling you, I started going to football games in 1954. I was 4 years old. And I was outside playing on a Friday, and back then we didn't have daylight savings times. You remember it was dark around 5:30 in September, and Daddy came in, and I saw him coming down the driveway, and I went to meet him. I was telling him I'm a daddy's boy, or was a daddy when my dad passed away many years ago, and I said, the car looks different. And Daddy was coming down with a 1954 Ford. He had just bought. He said, y'all get dressed. We going to a football game. I said, football game on Friday? He said, yeah, we're going to North Augusta High School football. I said, Daddy, we've never been to North Augusta. We are now. So we piled in the car and went down to Lions Field. And from that Friday until 1969 on Friday, I never missed a football game on Friday night. I saw the 2 state championship games we played. I saw the away games, the home games. It didn't matter where we played. And the difference between football, high school football today and high school football that I coached for almost 30 years, it hurts that the towns aren't behind athletes like they used to be. And I know kids aren't like they used to be. 52 years later, I'm still subbing as a school teacher. I retired from teaching in 2013, but I have subbed in the classroom since then. And I just enjoy young people. I had a man tell me one time, one of my former students, the father of 4 of my football players, told me, he said, if you hang around kids long enough, you'll stay young, but if you try to keep up with them, you'll get old. And so I just hang around them. I don't try to keep up with them. If you'll go to the next slide. Here, I'm going to start off with some of the best times in North Augusta football. In 1958, which was the end of North Augusta's 43-game year that we lost our 44th game. From 1956 through 1958, 1955 to halfway through 1958, we had won 43 straight football games, had not lost a game. We had tied a couple, but we had won and not gone without a loss. And we lined up in North Augusta. We knew it was going to be a big rivalry. They were undefeated, we were undefeated, and Greenville High School was coming to town. And we had played them every year. That was a big rivalry. And the boys from the big towns, as you know, Greenville was larger than Aiken or North Augusta back in those days even. And they came to town, and they were winning with about 2 minutes left, 13-6. We scored a touchdown. We missed our extra point. So we had to go for 2 if we were going to win. So it made it 13-12. And Dick Day, who ended up playing for the University of South Carolina and is in the North Augusta High School Hall of Fame, little old Verne there at the age of 8 was standing on the goal line along with half the stands in Lions Field. And to this day, Dick, everybody on North Augusta and from North Augusta says he made it over the goal line, which would have given us the win 14-13. But the officials said no, that he came up short. So our winning streak ended at 43. Well, to change things, we decided we weren't going to lose anymore. We went to the state finals that year. We were playing Lancaster. And I was telling John the other day, I'll never forget that game. We were playing Lancaster up at Lancaster for the state championship. It was cold, it was windy, and it had been sprinkling, almost sleet, not quite cold enough to sleet and snow. We were up there, and North Augusta was lining up, and if you ever went to a football game, and a lot of us were younger, that the kids or the kickers would kick on the sidelines when they were warming up. Well, I was sitting there and I was talking as I usually do, and they're known for talking. And all of a sudden, my dad says, "Duck." And when we ducked, all of a sudden the football flew over our head and hit the lady that was sitting next to my brother right in the face. Broke her nose. They had to take her out. And as an 8-year-old, I'll never forget that. I said, that was some way to, to remember the 1958 state football game that we ended up winning 19-6. But I don't even remember the lady's name. She had to be from North Augusta, because back then you wouldn't dare sit on the other side. You sat on your side and they go on the other side. And then in 1961 was an interesting year. Starting the year off, we went down to Beaufort. It rained in Beaufort. And it was pouring down rain in the whole field. And they laid out 2x12s for you to walk from the parking lot to the football field so that you wouldn't bog down in the rain, in the mud. And so we went over there, we beat Beaufort. And in that game, we went up to Clinton, or Clinton, however we called it Clinton back in those days, and we still do, many of us. We played them at Clinton in the Presbyterian College football field. That's where they played their high school game, was at Presbyterian College. And we won that game, and that was our second championship. Well, not that year, but the year after that, our coach, Kelly Galt, that I'm going to talk about in just a minute, leaves North Augusta to go to Presbyterian to become the college coach there. 1989 was the one year that I happened to be able to be on the sideline. I was athletic trainer of the high school then. And we started that year in 1989, 0-6. We had lost our first 6 ball games. We were supposed to be, in 1988, we were the state runner-up, had lost to Hartsville. We thought we had a better team then. And we had a better team in 1988 than we did in 1989. We had lost a lot of good players, and here we are going up to Carolina Stadium, Williams-Brice, on a cold night, raining night. And we played Lower Richland and were able to win that game 14-0. But it was interesting, to get there, we had to have some interesting things happen. We started 0-6, as I said, won the next 4 ball games, lost to Midland Valley, which at North Augusta, that's a cardinal sin. You lose to the Valley. When you lose to Midland Valley, everything's bad. And we haven't lost to them many times. Lost to them this year. But we lost to Midland Valley, and then all of a sudden we had to be on the road for all the playoffs. First game we went up to Lawrence, won 14-6 in a close ball game. Then we had to go to Airport. We had beaten Airport when we were 0-6. Airport was our next game, and we had beaten them bad in the that game in the regular season. We had to go back to Airport to play them in the playoffs. And lo and behold, we won that game 19-7. And then we had to go to Union. And Union County, as they called it, there's a county school, was then and is today. And we went up there, and they were ranked one of the top teams in the state. And our chances of winning were slim and none. And when we got up there, all of a sudden, end of the first quarter, 7-0. Halftime, 21-0. And a lot of the fans and everyone else said, it's over. All of a sudden, we come back out and we started playing ball. We scored a touchdown on a trick play that Coach Utsi had derived during halftime. Then we scored again. Then our great tight end who ended up playing tight end for Carolina, Matthew Campbell, catches a pass and runs 50-something yards, and we go down. We down 22 to 21, excuse me. And all of a sudden, we have to go for two, to 21 to 20. We have to go for two, and what do? We line up, and those of you that know anything about football, we put two tight ends on one side, and a tackle was an eligible receiver on the other side. And we throw the ball to the tackle, and he scores the extra point. We win the ball game 22 to 21. So we go to Williams-Brice, and in 1989, we had won the third state championship that North Augusta had ever had. It had some good, even back in the days when we had that 43-game winning streak, they didn't have state champion. We weren't in the classification that had state championships. So I really didn't know why we didn't, at least I didn't then, I don't now, but that was the reason why we didn't have that. The next slide, please. Next slide, we have a picture of the three greatest coaches at North Augusta. Then we have one down at the bottom that I'd like to refer to. Over there on the left side is Kelly Galt, coach from 1953 to 1963. He was the head coach of when we won the state championships in 1958 and 1961. His daughter was this guy right here, my first girlfriend when I was in elementary school. When I was in the third grade, she was in the second grade, and Joy was my little sweetheart back then when I started going to Hammond Hills Elementary School. But Callie drove a gray Jeep called the Gray Ghost, and he and my dad were real good friends, and so we had a lot of things in common going on back then. We used to talk, and football was just a thing to do. And then the next guy, Hubert Morris, who my uncle down in Ola, South Carolina, coached him in high school. And Coach Morris is the winningest coach in the history of North Augusta. He won more games than anybody in the history of North Augusta football. And then we have Bill Utze, who won the state championship in 1961 and who is still alive. He coached, well, all three of the other fellows up there have passed away. And Bill's the only one that's living. He lives up in Greenville, which is where he's from. But Bill was a great Christian man. Well, all three of them were great Christian men. Hubert, I've never in my life ever heard Hubert Morris say curse word. And I stood next to him in many a football game. The only profanity or close to profanity, he used the term "dad blame it." And that was his profanity. And if he heard a player use profanity, that came out of the ball game. If they said something at practice, they had to sit out a quarter, not a play. They had to sit out a quarter the next ball game. That's just, and he had prayer. I know even when he was coaching, it was against policy to have prayer. I won't say that I didn't get in a lot of trouble. I was reprimanded for it because I prayed for my team the whole time I coached. And I know we aren't supposed to combine the two, but the way I told them, I said, you don't have to pray, but I'm going to pray. And that's the way we did it. And then the guy down there at the bottom, Dick Sheridan, y'all may have heard of Dick Sheridan. He was from North Augusta, grew up over the hill from me. He had a brother that's a year older than I am that's still living, and a sister that's a year younger than I am still living. But Dick passed away this past year. Dick didn't coach at North Augusta, but he was a great player. Went to Carolina, played football there, little defensive back, but he won the state championship at OW. Then he went at Orangeburg Wilkinson, and then he became the head football coach at Furman University. And there's a story about Dick at Furman. There's a guy that needed a job or was looking for a job. They needed a basketball coach. And they were hiring basketball coaches, and a fellow came and applied for the basketball job, and he looked down and said the name Roy Williams. young fella, he said, I'm afraid you don't have the experience to coach here. We looking for somebody with a little bit more experience. And any of y'all that know anything about college basketball, Roy won national championships at Kansas, won national championships at North Carolina, and Roy retired 2 years ago. Roy's a year younger than I am. And Roy used to come to the Peach Jam that I'm in charge of feeding all the young men that come to the Peach Jam, all 800 of them. I'm in charge of feeding them a meal. But when I first started, I did parking, and Roy would come. I didn't know who he was the first year back in 1999. I was sitting outside parking, and this coach pulls up, and it was about 7 o'clock in the morning. Place didn't open at 9. And he asked me, he said, can you save me this place every morning? I said, yeah. And I said, give me your name. He said, I'm Roy Williams from Kansas. I said, oh my gosh, I can't believe this. And so Roy and I, from 1999 till he retired 2 years ago, every Peach Jam, we would go eat one meal together, and we would speak. And it's amazing who you get to meet down at Peach Jam. You see all these national coaches down there. But Dick didn't hire him, and Dick went on from Furman to North Carolina State and retired. When he retired to South Carolina to Pawleys Island. He didn't come back to North Augusta. He retired and had a real estate business and built contractor business. He didn't do any work, but he was owned the company that built a lot of those big houses down in Myrtle Beach, Pawleys Island, and all down there on that part of the state. The next slide we have there is some of our heroes that have played in all but one of them, all but two of them have been in the pros. The first one over there on the far side, back when I first started going, was Charlie Britt. If you've been around Aiken long, Charlie used to be the anchor for Channel 12 News years ago. But Charlie, when he was in high school, he played in 1956, 55, 56, 57. And his dad and my dad were real good friends. And Charlie played for the University of Georgia, and he was quarterback when he left high school to go to the University of Georgia. And then his junior year in college, Georgia recruited this other guy, and Charlie had to change positions and go to defense. That other fellow was a man by the name of Fran Tarkenton. And Charlie said, I was taller than Fran, I was faster than Fran, but I couldn't move like Fran. And if you ever saw Fran Tarkenton play pro football, he was a scrambler and he could move all around. Charlie said, I was a drop back passer, kind of like Peyton Manning, one of my favorite people. And Charlie said, I couldn't stay with him. So he moved to defensive back, and that was good enough for him to be drafted by the Los Angeles Rams. And when he went to LA, he played 5 years for the Rams. And then he met a guy by the name of Ricky Nelson. And I don't know how many of y'all remember Ricky Nelson, the singer. And also he was on the TV show Ozzie and Harriet. And Charlie was on many of those episodes as one of the people that you would see in the background walk around. He never had a speaking, well, yes he did. He said, yes sir, to Ozzie one time. And he said that was the only lines that he ever had. Charlie is still living. Charlie's 10 years older than I am. He's 84 years old and runs every day. He is, if you saw him, if you go down to Riverview Park, you'll see him down there every afternoon, and he is in the best shape of most 50 and 60-year-old men. He is in fantastic shape. He doesn't look as old as I do. And I'm 10 years younger than he is. The next one there is another fellow that's moved back here. And if any of y'all worked out at the plant at SRS, you may have run into this gentleman, Craig Bainham. Craig played back on the 1961 state championship team, was the star there, and he was drafted, received a scholarship to go to the University of Georgia Tech, or Georgia Tech University, and he played there. Then he was drafted by Dallas Cowboys, and if you ever remember the Ice Bowl, when Dallas Cowboys played the Green Bay Packers up in Green Bay, and they call it the Ice Bowl, the running back for the Cowboys was out there. I can't remember his name, Leroy, can't remember his last name, but anyway, he couldn't play, he was hurt. So Craig started that game. And Craig's daddy knew he was going to start, so Craig's daddy flew up to the Ice Bowl, and Buddy and Helen, Craig's mom and dad, were able to go into Green Bay with 0 degrees and watch their son play pro football there. Craig got to play a lot, but he started, that was the only game that he ever started. And he eventually was traded to the Chicago Bears, and after he retired, he became a Baptist minister, and then he started working out. He was pastor of Beach Island Baptist Church and working at SRS out there. And the next guy, number 12, I take it back, we have a couple more. These next two didn't make it to the pros either, they should have. The next guy there is Pat Collins, who received a scholarship to go to the University of Georgia, would have been one of the greatest players there. But he had something that happened to him that happened to me a year ago, February the 7th. But he was playing football, I wasn't. He was playing football and he broke his femur. And he had intercepted, playing defensive back, intercepted the pass. Back then, the freshmen didn't play on the varsity, on the regular team. They had freshman games the day before on Fridays. And he was playing against Florida. He intercepted the ball and got tackled and broke his femur, and he never played ball again. Even to this day, if you saw Pat, he works out at Georgia Florist. He walks around with a limp and messed his femur up really bad. And Pat, great guy. One of our favorite. I grew up with his older brother, and his dad and my dad were good friends. And Pat was just a great human being, and still is today. He lives in Thompson, but he does everything in North Augusta and Augusta. This next fellow is one of the rare, a lot of people classify him as the greatest athlete to ever play at North Augusta. His name is Jerry Priestley. He is the only player from North Augusta to receive a scholarship in 3 sports to the same university. And it's not like he went to some podunk college. He received a scholarship to play basketball, baseball, and football at Georgia Tech. He still lives in Atlanta. He comes every year to the Hall of Fame. If you came over to North Augusta on March the 2nd, Jerry would be there. Doesn't have quite as much hair as he has there. And Jerry was about 6'3", almost 6'4", a little bit taller than I am. But his dad was 5'8". Little dad, now you have a tall mom. His mom was tall, but his granddaddy was 6'6". And you know, my wife is a nurse, and she tells me, and all this science, I'm not a science. I've majored in English and history, those boring courses for kids, but I love them. And I was a rarity that you didn't find many coaches that taught English. You could find some that taught history, but not many that taught English. But Jerry was just a phenomenal athlete. When he pitched, you thought he was going to step on you at home plate. He had a high kick, and that long legs would come at you. Football, he could throw the ball 70 yards on the fly. In basketball, back when he was playing basketball, and Craig played basketball also, and Pat, they didn't have 3-point shots back in those days. You just had, when I played, we didn't shoot threes. We hit, everything was 2 points. And he would score 20, 30 points in a ball game, which in today's, he'd be scoring 40 and 50 points in a ball game. And then over there on the far side, we have one of the oldest guys, and Earl passed away 2 years ago. Earl Bainham. He was on the 1946 undefeated North Augusta football team. Now, Earl was one of the first great, but back in those days, in the 40s and early 50s, the Bainhams did not go to college. They had, if you go where the SRP Park is in North Augusta now, if you go back and you study the history of North Augusta, there used to be the clay pits. That was the Bainham pottery down there. And the Bainhams, when they graduated from high school, even when they were in high school, that's where they worked. And so when Earl graduated from high school, he went to work there. And then he decided he wasn't going to go work there. And he went, when in the 50s, when the DuPont took over the plant, opened the plant, he got out of the clay pits and he went to work in the plant. And he retired from that. But Earl has one record that I think is phenomenal. Now, my brother is a golfer. I do not play that game. It takes too long to play and too nerve-wracking for me. But my younger brother plays and he's pretty good at it, but he plays at Midland Valley Golf Club. Earl made an eagle in one round on every par 5 at Midland Valley. And as far as we know, that's still a record. In one round of golf, he made an eagle on all 4 of the par 5s. And until the day he died, Earl will let you know about it. And he was quite proud of that. The next, and you're going to notice that this name is coming up again. That next fellow there is Larry Bainham. He and Jerry Priestley, they probably are the 2 greatest athletes to ever play at North Augusta High School in any sport. Larry, I remember at one game we were, I can't remember who they were playing, but Coach Galt, my dad, and I were sitting up in front of the press box while the team was warming up. It was about an hour and a half before ball, and the team was out there just kicking and throwing. And Larry was kicking the next points. He kicked, he played offense, played defense, never came off the field. He punted, he was a punter, place kicker, running back, defensive back, he did it all. And Larry passed away 3 years ago. And till the day Larry passed away, he would tell you, I was the best. And the problem is, or the good thing is, he probably could back it up. He could do things. Back then, you know, grades didn't matter. And he played varsity football for North Augusta for 5 years. His last name was Bainham. Where did I tell you the Bainhams worked? At the pottery. So he didn't have to worry about a job. But when he graduated from high school, he didn't. Somehow, he did get into Georgia Military College for 2 years. And he said, that's not for me. He played 2 years at junior college there, then he came back. But he did not go back to the pottery. He got a job out at what then was Continental Can, then became Federal Paper, and then when International Paper bought out that, he after over 40-something years working there, he retired. And he married a great lady, Rosalie Bainham, who just passed away a couple months ago. She taught my two children, my son and daughter, how to ride horses. Larry lived about 3 miles out past me, but he was a great athlete. And this next one is the only one that I was able to actually play with. Is Charlie Waters. He had the longest career in pro football of anyone. He was another, like Jerry, played 3 sports, baseball, basketball, and football. And I always thought he was better in baseball than he was in football, because I played third base and he played shortstop. And he always told me, he said, Verne, you just stay on the base and you cover anything that you can reach within 3 feet. I've got everything else between second and third. And literally, I played next to him for 6 years. He could do it. He was just unbelievable. Grew up very poor. Daddy was a hard-working brick mason back in the old days. And good people, great people. And Charlie said, I'm going to work and I'm going to be able to build my mom and dad a house. I have nothing against you, but I always told Charlie he went to the wrong school. He went to Clemson. And I'm a Carolina guy. They paid for my daughter. My two brothers went there. I didn't go there to my graduate school because the rest of my school was paid for playing ball, so I went where they paid for it. But Charlie was drafted by the Cowboys, played defensive back, and Charlie was one of those that it was a phenomenal guy because, you know, in today's world, if you're good in one position, you want to play that one position. You don't want to play somewhere else. Well, he knew that he couldn't play safety. So Tom Landry moved him, called him in. He said, Charlie, let me tell you something. Never will forget Charlie coming home and telling me this story. He said, Verne, Coach pulled me in and he said, I either have to give it up or move. I said, what you gonna do? He said, I'm gonna move. And he said, I can do it. So he moved, became all-pro cornerback for 6 years. And if you know anything about the Dallas Cowboys back in their golden days, that was a guy by the name of Cliff Harris, number 43, that played safety. Well, Cliff and Charlie still own a construction company in Dallas. Charlie had a little tragedy, and Charlie decided he was going to be a coach for a while. And when he first retired, he was at Oregon, and he had a son that I can't remember what kind of birth defect it was. And one day when he came home from practice at Oregon, he found his son dead on the bed. And Charlie couldn't handle that. Charlie said, nope, no more football for me. So he and his wife packed up and their other siblings, other children, and they moved back to Dallas, and he and Cliff formed their own construction business. Now this next young man didn't make it to the pros, but if you're a Clemson fella, and he's on the time I ever pulled Clemson, Reggie Merriweather. Reggie's dad's a pastor still in Aiken County. I can't remember the name of the church, but Reggie was a running back that his only problem was he wasn't a 5'9". And we played a game against Lexington his junior year, because my son was a year ahead of him. And the Summers boy that Carolina was high on was playing for Lexington. We ended up beating them 49-48. Reggie had over 400 yards rushing, and the Summers boy had over 300 yards rushing. If you know anything about football, that meant that all you saw was number 49 of Lexington going up and down the field, and number 20, I can't remember, 28 I think he was, 28, Reggie going up and down the field. That was one of the most exciting games. But one thing that I appreciate about Reggie, he knew, unlike a lot of football players, he knew who made him good at running back, and that was the offensive line. Now, I was the father of an offensive lineman, but his mother, every Thursday before every ball game during football season, would cook supper on Thursday night for the offensive line to come over to their house to eat supper. And my son used to come home and tell us about the great meal that Ms. Merriweather had prepared for them that night. I think we're getting running out of time here. But let me fly through these others. If you go to the next slide there, some of these I've already mentioned there. These are the ones from North Augusta that have made it to the pros. Charlie, I told you about. Craig, I told you about. Charlie. Matthew Campbell, I told you about him in high school, but he went on to play at Carolina, and then he was drafted by the Carolina Panthers, and he was drafted as a tight end. Now, Matthew today is a head football coach at Lugoff-Elgin High School. Matthew, his senior year in high school, used to go pick up my two children from elementary school and bring them to me at the high school, because he would get out and I needed somebody to bring the kids up there. My wife was a nurse and she was working. So Matthew was the big boy that went and picked up my brother, my two children, not my brother, my two children. And for my son's 8th birthday, he had two people come to his birthday party. Matthew Campbell and the quarterback of that football team, Richard Davis. That was only two. And guess what they gave him for his birthday? Nope, a haircut. He wanted a haircut like they had, and you know what it was like? Shaved bald. They shaved his head, and they shaved it right there in the kitchen. So Matthew was kind of special, but Matthew, kind of like Charlie, had to make a big decision. When Carolina wanted to get Matthew was tall, he was big, had good hands, but he wasn't fast enough to be tight end. They asked him, said, will you move to guard? Well, for up until his senior year in high school, he had played tackle for us in North Augusta. And he said, yeah, I'll have to put on some weight because he only weighed 265 pounds, 6'5", and they wanted him to weigh 300. So he puts on 40 pounds and moves to offensive guard, and they trade him to the Washington Redskins. Well, he had a 2-year contract with the Redskins, and the Miami Dolphins wanted him because he was playing left tackle then. And left tackle, if you know anything about football, that's the most important for a right-handed quarterback because that's his blind side. So Matthew went to the head office there at the Redskins, and they said, what do we have to do to keep you? And he said, I tell you what, how about y'all give me a 4-year contract for $16 million and I'll stay because that's what Miami's offering me. And so Matthew stayed at Washington, retired from Washington, came home, and needless to say, he never had to work again, but he moved to Hilton Head and decided he missed working, so he got a job at Lugoff Elgin. He got his degree from Carolina, got a job at Lugoff Elgin, coaches there. His mom and dad live in North Augusta, and I see them all the time at the grocery store, and we're good friends. Now, Chris McKinnis there is another one, and he set the record for the longest field goal in the history of South Carolina for about 3 minutes. He kicked a 61-yard field goal for us to win the ball game, and 3 minutes later in overtime, we found out the guy from Spring Valley kicked one for 62 yards, beat him by a yard in Spring Valley. So he had the record for about a minute. And Chris went to the Air Force and was drafted by Bill, the Patriots. Can you think of his name? And he was drafted by them, and then he was also cut by him. So he never dressed out on Sunday, but he did get drafted there. Fred Benson played for the Green Bay Packers. He was just inducted into the Hall of Fame. I had the privilege of, the last 4 there, I had the privilege of teaching all 4 of them in class. And Matt Hazel went to Coastal Carolina, was drafted by the Colts, and he was able to dress out. He made the team, dress out for 1 week, and then they put him on waivers, and he was on a practice team. But he did get in 1 game for the Indianapolis Colts, and Matt is still playing football over in Europe. He's playing in the European football over there. And if you look at the next slide right quick, because I think my time is gone, and I knew this was going to happen. I told Ken, I said, I get started and I could talk forever about these. These guys here, a bunch of them, I've already mentioned. Earl, Larry, Dick Day played at South Carolina. Sandy Anderson played at South Carolina. Jerry, I told you about. Ned Bainham played at South Carolina. Al Lamb, who's a great coach at Silver Bluff and retired, I taught him and coached with him. And his dad's the one hired me as a teacher, he was a superintendent of schools that hired me. But Al played baseball at Augusta College back in the days. Hugh Eggersman and Jerry Sagas, they both were my age and played football at Southern Mississippi University. And Hugh was the player of the year, player of the week when Southern Miss beat Mississippi and Peyton Manning, not Peyton Manning, their daddy. Archie Manning was playing for Mississippi. He was playing defensive end, and he sacked Archie 4 times in that ball game, and he was a National Player of the Week. Pat, I told you about him. Sammy Twiggs was a star and still works with Georgia Southern University down in Statesboro. Reggie, if you listen to Clemson, if you're a Clemson fan, you listen to Clemson football, he's one of the commentators on their football telecast on the radio. And Steve Nix, C.J. Bird played for Georgia, didn't get drafted, works for Chick-fil-A, a big executive in Atlanta. I taught him, did teach his younger brother, Rashad, who played for Georgia Southern, and his sister played softball for me. Great mom and dad. We see them once a month at California Dreaming, Charles and Charlene. And then Steve Mixon is in Atlanta, also played football for South Carolina, and he was just inducted into the Hall of Fame. I don't know if North Augusta, we are known as a football town. We're known as the bedroom of Aiken and bedroom of Augusta. They always, when I was growing up, said, the rich people live in Aiken, poor people live in North Augusta. But I was born here, and she mentioned that I was born in Aiken, and that was an accident. We were moving from Cordell, Georgia to Columbia, and my mother went into labor on the way. And Uncle Willard and Aunt Margaret lived in Aiken, and my older brother had been born in Aiken 4 years prior to that. So they stopped, and I was born here, and I lived here for a week, and then we moved to Columbia. So that's how I was born in Aiken. That's the truth. As a matter of fact, I needed my birth certificate 10, 15, 20 years ago, maybe longer than that. And they had trouble finding it because I never lived here. And when Mom and Dad took me out of the hospital, they hadn't even named me yet. Because I ended up being named for an uncle and for my daddy's war buddy, as I was sharing here. My dad's war buddy that was a ranger with my dad in World War II. And so it's by accident that I was born here, but I'm proud of it, that I'm an Aiken County boy, that I was born in Aiken and I live in North Augusta, and I'm a diehard South Carolinian. I don't know, my son is an assistant principal in North Carolina, and I go up there and it's pretty, love to visit, but it isn't home. This is just, I can't find a better place. I live in the country, but the city is coming to me where I live out in Edgefield County, and I love every minute of it. But I appreciate y'all listening to the long-winded man here. I was a teacher and I was a preacher. So I'm used to, I was the moderator of the Aiken Baptist Association in 1979 and 80, and I was interim youth pastor at Aiken First for a year and a half, for 18 months, when Charles Chenault was the pastor there back in 80 and 81, and wanted me to stop teaching and coaching and become full-time youth pastor, but I had my principal, Ed Stewart, who hired me, whose son's a Methodist minister. When I walked in to be applied, I was taking his wife was retiring, and I was preparing a sermon at the church where I was serving, and they asked me to come apply for a job. And I said, I've never taken an education course in my life. And I said, well, yeah, I have. I had to take 2 to graduate. But they said, you majored in English and history, you know the English language. I said, yeah, I know that. And they said, just come apply, just put your name on the book. So a friend of mine talked me into going over to North Augusta, and when I walked in, the principal said, you are one of 25 people to apply. You will never get the job, but we want your name on the record. You go down to the superintendent and put your name on record. Well, I filled out the application, the only application I ever filled out in my life. I turned it into him and said, when can you start? And I said, wait a minute. Wait a minute. They said I wasn't going to get the job. And Mr. Stewart and Mr. Lowndes sat there and told me, Mr. Stewart had come from the high school down to the superintendent's office, which was in North Augusta at that time, and told me, he said, you will witness and be strongly influenced on more young people teaching than you ever will in a church. And that's amen to that. I have taught over 7,000 students. And I would have never reached that many in a church. I don't care what church I've been at. And so I feel like I was kind of like Coach Mars. I was a weirdo. I was one of those coaches that would fuss, carry on, but never used profanity in my life. You can talk to kids and you can coach kids. You don't have to cuss at them. You can talk to them just like I'm talking to you, and they understand you or listen to you a whole lot better. Thank y'all. If anyone have any questions, I can. Yes, sir.
How were the three bands related?
Okay, let me see which three I have on that slide. Earl's daddy and Larry's dad. Okay, Larry and Ned are brothers. And Earl's brother was their dad, but Earl was the baby of the old pottery, the ones that started the pottery. Larry and Ned's daddy was named Buddy, and they were that's their uncle. Earl was their uncle.
What about Craig? He's not even on that.
Craig's not okay. Craig was the. It was kind of funny. Craig was the nephew of Ned, and it was only a year difference. So Ned was his uncle and a year older than him. They, wait a minute, no. Yeah, that's right. But that was right. Yeah, Buddy and Earl, yeah. There was 6 boys and 1 girl. The girl married a Bowman. And if you ever heard of Leo Bowman that used to work at Channel 12, that was his daddy. And until I broke his record on the number of games attended, Leo was a chain guy at North Augusta forever. And then he was married to Earl's sister. And Julia. And anyway, Leo was a chain guy. He had attended games. He hadn't missed any games. And I did end up missing some, but overall I attended more games than he had. But that's how they related. Back it used to be Bainham after Bainham after Bainham in North Augusta. Everybody knew the bands, and if you didn't play, my wife's old boyfriend, whose sister was my wife's best friend growing up, was a band. And Mark was kind of like me. I didn't play football, not because I didn't like it, but when I graduated from high school, I was 6'3" and 135 pounds. And I was one of those weird people. I was a white boy that could jump. And I could dunk the ball with both hands. And that's how I was able to play college ball too, because I could jump and shoot. And when I played baseball, the coaches in college used to say we only have 4 basketball players and 8 players on the field, because they couldn't see the third baseman, they couldn't see the other guy playing because I turned sideways, they couldn't see me. And they used to make jokes about that. But relating to all this, and I told I would, when I was the moderator of the Aiken Baptist Association, I was also, they called it an athletic director of the association. We had basketball league. If you go to a Baptist church in Aiken Baptist, in Aiken and all, we all play basketball. And that was a fella I told I needed another official. And they said there's another guy in town that you need that knows all these people and that you won't have any trouble with, and you need to get him and get him to help you, and the 2 of you can referee anything. And I said, who is? He said, Freddie Perry. William Perry's older brother that was a year older than me. And Freddie and I, for 8 years, refereed every basketball game that Aiken Baptist Association had, and we never had any trouble. Freddie, his famous words, "We'll stop the game if you start arguing with me." And that's just, we had no trouble. And William, two quick stories about William. William, when we played Aiken High School, William's senior year, which was football season 1980, graduated class 81. Our stadium wasn't that large over North Augusta. And, wasn't that old over North Augusta. And it's supposed to hold somewhere around 6,000 to 7,000 people. They say today that we put between 8,000 and 10,000 people in there for the night that North Augusta was playing at Aiken with William Perry. People were sitting on the banks, they were sitting everywhere. I never will forget, Coach Morris said, "Verne, what are we gonna do if we lose?" He said, "These people are gonna be everywhere." And he was so worried about all that, he said, "I wonder if our concession stands will have enough food up there." Coach Morris used to worry about everything. And so, anyway, we did end up losing, but it was a real close ball game. And then that year in basketball, we played Aiken, and it was kind of like revenge. We had beaten Aiken over here, and we were playing in North Augusta. The only game they had lost that year in the region was against us. They beat us in North Augusta, and it was going to be for the region championship. And I coached basketball back then too, and I told, I was assistant of varsity, the JV coach, and I told because we kind of did it together, and I told our big son, Michael Rouse, who ended up playing for USC Aiken, has all kinds of records of still at USC. I told him going out, Michael is 6'7", and William was 6'3" and weighed 300 some pounds, but he could dunk a basketball. He could get off the floor. That was one of the greatest athletes I've ever seen at that size. And I told him, I said, Toe, we called him Toe, not Michael. I said, Toe, if you will win the tip and dunk that first ball, the game will be over, we'll win. He tips it to his friend Reggie Thomas. Reggie feeds it back to Michael. Toe, Williams under the board for the rebound. The ball goes through the net, bounces off of Williams' head onto the stage at North Augusta. The game was over. 2-0. We beat him by 20-something points. It wasn't even close. And after the game, it was funny. I don't know if y'all have ever met William Perry. And, he's got the gap teeth. And he was sitting there and he said, he called me by my first name because he knew me when I was working with Freddie, his older brother. He said, Verne, said, if you had him knock my brains out the first of the game, we would have won that ball game. And I said, Freddie, that's just because y'all beat us in football, the reason we did that. But I hate the situation William's in now. He's not in good health, and it's a shame because he was a real good athlete. And I knew Michael Dean, Holly, and I went to it. After I finished at Anderson, I went to Augusta. I was in school with Holly Perry over at Augusta, so I've known all the Perrys for a while. Any other questions? I'm sorry, I could go on if you have another hour, but if you have another 2 or 3 hours, my wife told me, treat y'all nice. You have to remember, my wife is not an athlete, and she could run, and that's why she had to catch me. I had to catch her. All the boys were after her, no girls were after me. I was too skinny, but she had to put up with me, and she put up with me coaching. She's a great woman. We've been married 48 years. I had to date her 8 years because her dad wouldn't let us get married until she finished college, and I'm 4 years older than she is. And so I had to hang around. That was why when I was applying for the job, I was still in town. I wasn't in seminary because I was waiting around for Shirley to get out of school so we get married, because I planned on her, me going to Southwestern Baptist Seminary and her going to Texas Christian, which is right there next to each other in Dallas. We had it all planned, but she's the only child, and he said, nope. She had to have her nursing degree. And she worked at Aiken Hospital there for a couple of years. She's a retired 40-year nurse. Well, thank y'all.
Thank you.